Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes. Which, fun fact, I almost said the wrong name
Your name or the
because
podcast name?
my name, because we were just talking about something before this, and I was like, oh, I need to text Tiffany. And so, I just texted Tiffany, and Tiffany was on my mind for some reason. I was like, hi, and then I had to be like, it's Courtney, not Tiffany.
Have
Don't
you
know why.
ever have you ever called somewhere and said like, "Hi, so and so, it's so and so," but like gotten it flipped? So like if you were calling me and you were like, "Hi, Courtney, it's Jacqueline," versus
I don't think I've ever done that. I
I've
try to
definitely done
avoid
that at
using
work
names.
before. So
In general, I just try to avoid names because I feel
yeah.
like it's where it gets messy. Um, I do have people who remember my name wrong, though. We had this big project at work where I had to call a lot of people, basically, and I'd always be like, "Hi, I'm Courtney," and blah 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 blah. And then
hmm
the girl was like, "Okay, hold." And then she come back and she was like, "Brittany," and I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Whatever. I'm not gonna correct you. I'm never gonna speak to you again."
when when I worked for the apartment complex that I worked for, the mailman like one day called me Jessica, and like I think it was one of those things that like I kind of didn't realize it until like after he left, and I was like, oh, like that was kind of weird. But then like he did it again, and then it happened so many times that I was like, I can't do anything about it
My
now.
name's
Like
Jessica
I'm
now.
just Jessica, and like I wore a name tag, so I would like put my hair over it when he would like come in, so we didn't have to have
It's
that awkward.
me, Jessica.
And I'm just like, my God, why could I not just say, oh, by the way, my name's not
I
Jessica?
know. It's that awkward thing where you're just like, well,
It's so
just gonna
hard.
ride this out now. Cause then you're like, when do you correct that? When do you fix that?
Which also reminds me, I don't know why it reminded me of this, but just like not having the courage to like speak up and say something. So I took Millie to the library last week, and there was like this other little girl that was playing with her. And then the mom came over, and like she had like an older daughter, and they're like the same age difference that like my daughters are gonna be. And so like I was like chatting with her and stuff, and she just seemed like someone that I would like really get along with. And after I got home, I was like, Andrew, I was like, I really wanted to like ask her to have a play date or something, but it's so like awkward. And he's like, no, he's like, as adults, we have to like get past that. He's like, I do it too. He's like, I'm not, he's
Yeah.
like, I'm not making fun of you. He's like, I would do the same thing. But he's like, we have to get past that point of being like, oh, but what if like they think I'm weird? It's like, just do it. And if they never call you, it's
Mm-hmm.
fine. Like it's not,
Yeah.
a big deal. But she seemed like we would get along great. She asked how my book was, and then she was like, "Oh, I just read Fourth Wing and I loved it." And I was like, "Oh yeah, like I loved Fourth Wing." And she was like, "Of course I'm on hold for all the good books because people found out about the library all of a sudden." And like, but yeah, and her daughter was really sweet, and her and Millie were having a blast putting all the magnets up on the board. And anyway, but yeah, so sometimes you just gotta go on a
You
limb.
gotta shoot your shot.
Yeah, I don't know who I'm preaching to since clearly it's not me, but anyone out there that needs to hear this message, there you go.
Well, we do have a little mini update.
hmm
Um, in a case that I really want to cover semi soon, but I gotta wait for some more information on victims to come out. But
hmm
there's Wade Wilson, who's also being known as like the Deadpool killer because he has the same name as Deadpool. He murdered two women in Florida. He kind of made big news because some women across the world were calling him hot. Don't know why.
Ugh.
That you need to talk to your therapist,
Yeah.
or find a therapist.
I'll have
But
nightmares about that picture of him in court. Like
yeah,
it's I don't
yeah.
get it. I don't see it.
Yeah, me either. But yeah, so he was found guilty a couple weeks, months ago. I don't remember when exactly he was found guilty, but he was just recently sentenced and he was sentenced to death. So got a got a pretty big
Yeah.
sentence in there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll just get into today's episode, which is pretty horrific, by the way. I'm really sorry to do
Yeah.
this to you guys. I did not know the extent of some of these crimes when I started this one, but here we are. So if you want to stick around, please do. Um, so our sources for this episode included an episode of Killer Siblings, which was season 1, episode 8, called The Brileys, a couple of Richmond Times article, an Oxygen article, a Washington Post article, and we did also use Wikipedia because this was back in the 70s and the newspaper articles, some of them were kind of lacking information, especially as we get into some of the like supposed crimes, but Wikipedia had that information. So I did go ahead and include it, but I just kind of wanted to put that general Wikipedia disclaimer. And the crimes that were only mentioned there and not in these other like more reputable articles, we did use a lot of allegedlys. So just want to make that clear at the beginning. So Richmond, Virginia was a very high crime city in the 1970s with high rates of drug use, assault, and robberies. The Briley Brothers were an infamous gang of serial killers who terrorized Richmond in the 70s. Linwood Briley was born on March 26, 1954, to James and Bertha Briley. The couple already had a 1-year-old son named Edward. So James Briley worked for the city of Richmond laying pipes. He was a very quiet and reserved man, but people said he wasn't really someone whose temper you wanted to witness. So it seemed like he kind of kept his cool until he didn't. Bertha worked at Virginia Union University as a food service manager and was very well liked by everyone. They had a pretty nice home in a middle-class neighborhood of Richmond. And James Briley was born on June 6, 1956, and Anthony was born on February 17th, 1958. Which also I just want you to think about those dates and the 4 boys in 4 years here, because that's a lot.
That's a lot.
So the oldest brother, Edward, went to live with relatives as a teenager and was not part of the crimes that would be later committed by the other brothers. As children, the Briley brothers were very good kids. They were very helpful to their neighbors. They would help mow lawns, work on cars. Like, everyone really liked them, and they just seemed like good, sweet kids. Linwood was very intelligent and knew how to speak to people. James was more spontaneous, kind of less intelligent, and would like mouth off more than Linwood. Linwood was more like composed and kind of like manipulative versus like James was more like sporadic and kind of, I also thought it was funny in the Killer Siblings episode, one of the detectives that worked on this case, when he was talking about James, he used the phrase, "the empty wagon makes the most noise." And I've never heard that, but I laughed out loud.
The empty wagon okay. Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard that.
Like, he was kind of like nicely calling him dumb and how much he talked, and he's like, well, the empty wagon makes the most noise. And it was just like this like older like Southern man, so you can imagine like the accent, and it was great. So the youngest brother, Anthony, was more of a follower. Like, he was very quiet, reserved, and as they got older, their father was the one who maintained control of the boys. He was strict, but then he would often like come home and lock himself in his bedroom, leaving Bertha to handle them. And James and Bertha separated when the boys were teenagers, and this kind of led to some turmoil in the family. And the brothers then started collecting exotic animals like tarantulas, scorpions, piranhas, and pythons. Just,
Nope.
A few fun animals there.
My children started being like, I'm bringing these home, I'd be like, nope, we're drawing the line here.
Yeah. Nope. Also do want to put in a trigger warning for animal abuse if you want to skip ahead 15 seconds for this next one. They also had Dobermans, and they would like throw live cats at the Dobermans for them to attack them. So.
But she would have also told me to mute.
I'm sorry. I did that one. I did put the trigger warning in the notes though.
So. I mean, yeah, but I still didn't want to hear it.
Yeah, same. But yeah, so they really just started getting out of control in these teenage years. And it got to a point where their father was no longer able to manage them and just started like padlocking himself in his room all the time and just letting them kind of set their own rules and do their own things. I guess at this point, they're like 3 large teenage boys, and he's just like, I'm overpowered. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, let me just lock you in here. Figure it out yourselves.
Yeah. Which I don't know if they just lived with their father. Like, their mother wasn't really mentioned at all after this, so I don't really know what that dynamic was like. But on January 28th, 1971, 57-year-old Orlin Christian was in her yard hanging clothes to dry. Her husband had just passed away, and 16-year-old Linwood Briley saw her out his window and just shot her with his .22 rifle in the neck. She immediately fell to the ground and died. Her family found her, and it wasn't immediately obvious that she died from a gunshot wound, which I don't know if there like wasn't a lot of blood.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of confused about that, but I mean, also maybe like in the grass, like maybe it wasn't something that was super obvious, like where she got hit. But her family knew that she had heart problems, and since her husband had just died, they thought that she just died of like a sudden heart attack. And it wasn't until she was at the funeral home that the staff noticed a hole in her neck with some blood around it and realized that this was not a natural death. So her death was ruled a homicide and the police were contacted. And Detective James Gaudette like scanned the area around Orland's backyard using a piece of plywood at the height of Orland's neck to kind of see like what is within the distance of like where this woman
Mm-hmm.
would have been standing. And he saw that a window from the Briley home faced directly where Orland was when she was shot. And when they interviewed neighbors, someone reported hearing a gunshot, and neighbors speculated that Linwood was responsible. When police spoke with Linwood, he said it was an accident and he was just shooting at squirrels. He's like, oh, I didn't mean to. I was just shooting at squirrels. Didn't mean to hit her.
Okay. But if you don't mean to, you don't go tell somebody, you don't go
Right?
see if she needs help. I don't know
Whoops.
if it would have saved her, but you could at least try.
Exactly. Especially because like they didn't even notice until she was at the funeral home. So it's not like it was like
Yeah.
immediate. So he was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and spent 1 year in juvenile detention. So in 1972, 16-year-old James robbed a convenience store, and when police arrived, James waited to ambush them and started shooting. He was caught and sentenced to juvenile detention, where he also spent a year. And instead of being reformed, James just came out as a smarter and more sophisticated criminal, so he wasn't getting any kind of help or rehabilitation. He was just learning how to be better at his crimes. So in the mid-70s, the three brothers started committing crimes together, including robberies and selling and using drugs. They would assault people, usually in the act of robbing them or selling them drugs, and they became known as the Briley Brothers Gang, and a 15-year-old named Duncan Meekins joined them as well. So he was friends with Linwood and lived on the same block, and he was just inspired by the three brothers, just peak role models over here.
Not the idol you want in your life.
Yeah. And they would bring stolen jewelry and electronics back to the Briley home, so there is some speculation that their father may have been aware kind of when all of this was starting. And police were suspicious that they were responsible for the string of crimes around town, but they didn't have anything concrete tying them to the crimes, didn't have anything to prove it. On March 12, 1979, William and Virginia Butcher had just returned to their house in Henrico County. It was shortly before 9 p.m., and someone knocked on the door. They thought it was the paper boy coming to collect payment, but when they opened the door, an unknown man said that his car had broken down and asked if they could call AAA for him. William said he would be happy to and asked for the man's AAA card. So the man got the card out, and when William opened the screen door to get the card, the man pushed his way inside with three other men. He held a gun to William's head and a knife to his throat, and he told Virginia not to make any noise or they would cut off William's ear. They tied the couple to chairs and then robbed their home, and when they were going through the house, they were also pouring gasoline on everything while they're tied to these chairs.
Okay.
So before they left the house, they lit it on fire with William and Virginia tied to the chairs inside. But William was able to get loose from his ropes and get a knife from the kitchen to cut the ropes that Virginia had been tied with. Another trigger warning for animal death here if you want to skip, or Courtney, if you want to cover your ears. Yes. So they escaped from the house, but unfortunately their cat Tinkerbell did die in the fire. And the four men were gone by the time the butchers got out of the house, so they couldn't tell police which way they had gone. But they did steal the butcher's car, their .32 caliber gun, and their police scanner. So police spoke to people in the area and learned that the Briley brothers might be responsible, but again, they didn't have any evidence of that. A week later, the Briley brothers are believed to have robbed and murdered a vending machine serviceman named Michael McDuffie in his home. And on March 31st, Linwood supposedly shot and killed 28-year-old Edric Alvin Clark over a drug dispute involving Duncan. On April 9th, the Brileys are believed to have raped, robbed, and shot to death 76-year-old Mary Gowan. They followed her across town from her babysitting job to her home. In July, 17-year-old Christopher Phillips was hanging around the Brileys' vehicle, and they believed he was trying to steal it. Allegedly, the Brileys drug him to a field and beat him to death, and Linwood is said to have delivered the final blow with a cinder block to the head. Just like so brutal.
Very brutal.
John Gallagher was a disc jockey for a country music station and went by Johnny G, and he also played in a band. And on September 14th, 1979, he was playing a show at a club on the south side of Richmond, and he stepped outside behind the club to smoke a cigarette during a break in the set and then disappeared. His car was found the next day with his hairpiece nearby, but no one knew what had happened to Johnny G. 2 weeks later, his body was found in the James River. Johnny G had been shot in the back of the head with a .30 rifle, and his belt, money pouch, and rings were missing. Sometime in September, Thomas Saunders was allegedly shot by Duncan Meekins during a disturbance at a gambling house. And on September 30th, 62-year-old nurse Mary Wilfong was followed home and beaten to death at her front door. Her apartment was then robbed. On October 6, 1979, police received a call about a break-in and homicide on Fifth Avenue. Neighbors found 75-year-old Blanche Page and 59-year-old Charles Garner brutally murdered inside their home. Charles had been pinned to the floor with knives, scissors, and his head had been bashed in, likely with a baseball bat. So, like, not only was he stabbed, he was pinned to the floor with, like, knives and open scissors.
Goodness.
A fire had also been started on his back using the yellow pages. Blanche was found upstairs in her bed with her head bashed in as well. She had been beaten so badly that she was unrecognizable, and the house had also been robbed. Blanche was also blind, so she wouldn't have been able to see what was happening to her during all of this. So this murder was so brutal and unlike anything the city of Richmond was used to. The community was very shaken, and word on the street was that the Briley brothers were responsible. But again, nothing to prove it, just what everyone is saying. But you kind of got to have evidence to do something about that. So police did put surveillance out on the Briley brothers after this. While they were under surveillance, Linwood and James were heard arguing about whether a van parked near their house was the police or not. So James didn't think so, but Linwood did. James then shook the van and fired a gun into the air and on the ground. So Shirley Englehart, who was an investigator with the Henrico Police Department, was alone in the van. And James said that if police were inside the vehicle, that they would have come out shooting. So Linwood was satisfied with this answer, and then the two just left in his car, and Shirley remained inside the van. She's like, I'm not going out. I'm just going to stay right here.
The empty wagon makes the most noise.
So on October 18th, the Brileys had been driving around with Duncan in their Nova, and the surveillance team was tailing them. They couldn't stay too close, though, because they wanted to avoid detection. So police saw the Brileys turn on Barton Avenue, and then they soon heard gunshots, but they didn't know exactly where they were coming from. But then they saw the Nova take off, and they started chasing the Brileys, but they got away. So they're like, shit, like, we're right here, and we know something happened, but we don't know exactly what or where. But 12 hours later, a triple homicide was reported at a house on Barton Avenue. And when police entered, they found 25-year-old Judy Barton, who was 8 months pregnant. She had been shot in the head and was covered with a sheet, and allegedly she had been raped by multiple men. Her husband, 26-year-old Harvey Wilkerson, was next to her. He had also been shot in the head and was covered in a sheet. And the couple's 5-year-old son, Harvey Jr., was dead on the couch next to them, and he had been shot as well. Harvey was a well-known drug dealer in the area and was friends with the Briley brothers, and the family had pet snakes, and their killers let them out into the house before they left, so animal control had to come in before this crime scene could be fully processed.
My goodness.
Just horrific murders.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, guys.
It's bad. So the day after the bodies were found, Linwood took his father to work, and police knew he would get off work at 11, so they waited for Linwood to come back and pick him up. A patrol officer tried to pull over Linwood when he was in the car with his father and Duncan, and Linwood immediately made a right turn and got out of the car and started running, which isn't suspicious at all, you know?
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. His car with his father and Duncan still inside ran into a light pole. Police chased Linwood for 3 to 4 blocks and finally caught him and cuffed him. Duncan was caught as well, and both were arrested and put in separate cop cars. Police then picked up Anthony and James. All three Briley brothers asked for an attorney, and police interviewed their father, but determined he was afraid of his sons and he wouldn't cooperate with them. Which is like kind of crazy if you think about it. Like your sons are so evil that like you're scared of them.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. So Detective Morgan went to the interrogation room to interview Linwood, and Morgan was friends with Johnny G and recognized the ring Linwood was wearing as belonging to Johnny G. Morgan was good friends with him and had actually been with John when he purchased the ring. So, up until this point, the Briley brothers were not suspect in John Gallagher's murder. Other detectives had to get Morgan out of interrogation room before he lost control because it's
Which is just
like,
so crazy that like that's how they found out who killed
mm-hmm,
him was like the detective who was there was like, "Oh, I actually recognize that ring." Like,
yeah, crazy. So, because Duncan was a juvenile, his parents were called in and they convinced him to tell officers the truth. Duncan told police everything he knew and had been involved with. He said he was with the Briley brothers when they attempted to kill the butchers. He was in charge of tying William up, and William begged him to not tie the ropes too tight, so he didn't. And this did likely save William's life since he was able to get out of the ropes and cut his wife out of hers. He also confessed to other murders that the police had not yet tied the Briley brothers to. And some of the previously mentioned alleged murders may have come from Duncan's confession. And when police searched their house, they also found newspaper clippings of their crimes in a scrapbook. So Duncan told the police that Johnny G was outside taking a smoke break during his band set at the club when the Brileys noticed his shiny belt buckle. They turned around and went back to Johnny G and beat him up, took his keys, and drove him to an island in the James River in his own car. So they took his belt buckle, money pouch, and rings, and Linwood put the ring on his own finger. They also took parts off John's car and put them on their own car, and they made him walk to the bank of the island, and Linwood then shot him in the back of the head. So everything Duncan was telling them was backed up by physical evidence. I mean, we already know the ring is being backed up by what he says. But investigators were also able to determine that the Briley's Nova had a hubcap and other parts from John's car on it, just like Duncan had said. Duncan also told them where they would find a holster to a pistol outside, and it was right where he said it would be. And the TV set from the Barton Avenue home was found inside James' bedroom. And based on evidence and Duncan's testimony, Anthony was present but did not actively participate in any of the murders. Police offered him a deal, but he refused because he wouldn't betray his brothers. So the three Briley brothers and Duncan Meakin were all charged with the murders of Harvey Wilkerson, Harvey Jr., Judy Barton, Charles Garner, Blanche Page, and John Gallagher. Investigators believe they were responsible for at least five more murders, but only charged them with the ones they believed they had enough evidence for. So during this trial, Duncan confessed on the stand that he was actually the one who killed Harvey Wilkerson. He said Linwood told him he had to, quote, get one, so he did. And because of his cooperation with the police, he accepted a plea deal and received the lighter sentence of life in prison plus 80 years. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
that was his light sentence.
yeah. He was also given an alias and sent to an out of state prison where he wouldn't have to interact with the Briley brothers, because I'm sure if they found him, he would not be having a good time. It wouldn't.
Exactly. Like they definitely recognized the reputation of the Briley brothers, and they're like, "We'll
Yeah.
let you live in both manners of the word.
Yeah.
Like you're not getting the death penalty, and also we'll get you away from them because
Because that life sentence would probably be short if the Briley brothers
exactly.
found him.
Yeah.
Anthony was also convicted and sentenced to life in prison. James and Linwood were both convicted and sentenced to death. On March 12th, 1980, James and Linwood Briley were sent to the Mecklenburg Correctional Center, which was a tough maximum security prison. The other inmates that were aware of their reputation on the streets, like, just stayed out of their way. They were like, "Oof, no, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna mess with these boys.
Nope.
No, thank you."
Like you go ahead.
And it wasn't hard for them to take control of the prison, obviously. Guards were intimidated by them and would do favors for them, including bringing them money, drugs, and shanks. And the Brileys also sold drugs in prison. So In the day room, they started meeting often with four other death row inmates and supposedly working on their appeals. However, they were actually planning an escape. So they started making their plans in October of 1983, and Linwood was scheduled for execution at 30 years old. The Brileys were the ringleaders and planned their escape along with Derek Peterson, Lim Tuggle, Willie Leroy Jones, and Earl Clinton. So on May 31st, 1984, late at night when only the night shift was present, Peterson overpowered the woman working the control room and hit the releases for the others to get out. All had shanks on them because obviously the guards were giving them to them.
Exactly. I'm like, you kind of led to this, you know?
Yeah. And surprise, surprise, they forced the guards to strip and then put on their uniforms. They also got helmets and riot gear and put that on. They put a TV on a stretcher and covered it with a blanket that had been sprayed with a fire extinguisher so that it would look like a bomb. They put it in the back of the van and jumped in. They convinced the guards at the gate to open the gate so they could get the bomb out. And all six were now free from the prison. So the community was shocked and wondered, how could this happen at a supposedly high security prison?
Yeah, like this is supposed to be like a maximum security prison, and now you have 6 death row inmates on the loose.
Escaped, yeah. So the public, especially Richmond, was frantic that six death row inmates are now free and on the loose. And this was the largest death row prison escape in the US. The prosecutor's neighbor in Richmond actually put a sign up in his yard pointing to where the prosecutor lived to make sure if they came for him, they wouldn't accidentally come into his house.
Which is not funny, but like they just like, I'm gonna make sure that you know, because they probably know the general idea. He's like, he's right
Over there.
here. It's not me. He's over there.
Not me. I bet that prosecutor was side eyeing him for He's like, I'm moving.
Right?
You're a bad neighbor.
He's like, just gave me up like that.
So, police were set up watching the Brileys' home in Highland Park and monitored their known friends. And a manhunt ensued across Virginia and North Carolina. 150 armed officers from 5 different agencies, including the FBI, were set up every 50 to 100 yards searching for the 6 inmates. On June 1st, Derek Peterson and Earl Clinton stole some wine and cheese and they went into a laundromat in Warrenton, North Carolina, about an hour south of the prison. And this is where they were captured. The hunt for the
Over
rest.
wine and cheese. You just
Wine.
escaped from death row and you get
And you're like,
captured
I
because
need a charcuterie board.
like what?
I need a charcuterie board.
And do some
Like,
laundry.
I know. And to think, you know, not to say people can't have sophisticated palates, but I'm like, I never would think someone on death row would be like, wine and cheese.
Like, this is what I've been missing all these years. This is what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. So the hunt for the rest continued. Black men in Richmond started wearing t-shirts that said, I'm not one of the Briley brothers. Because they're like, again, like the guy, the next door neighbor to the prosecutor, he's like, no, I'm
Yep.
not.
Not
Leave
involved.
me
Don't
out of
don't
it.
come for me. Nope. Nope.
And a local artist also made Briley Brothers trading cards, which I wonder if like there's still some around.
Oh God, I'm
Like the
sure there
original.
are. I'm sure they have to be.
I just want to see. I just want to see how much one's going for these days.
Let's see. I'll do some research. Hold
Okay.
on.
I'll read the next paragraph while you do that. On June 8th, Lim Tuggle was arrested in Vermont after robbing a gift store at knife point. He and Willie Leroy Jones have driven to Vermont and were living in the woods. So they come out of the woods to go to a gift shop for some reason. Jones was arrested after calling the state police on himself and saying he wanted to turn himself in. Which, again, this just shows the empty wagon makes the most noise. Wine and cheese, a gift store, and this other guy just being like, I think I liked prison more than these woods.
He's like, I'm done. This was a bit
I'm
much.
tired.
I found this like whole article on
Mhm.
slantblogspot.com from November 7th, 2007.
It's so weird watching your eyes just skim.
Scanning. Okay, there's nothing to this. It's just from the guy who did them, but I can't find anything about
Oh.
like I mean, this was from 2007 when he was talking about it. So I guess they're still like around, but I don't know
Yeah.
what came of them. So
Hmm.
sorry, I didn't have a more exciting update there.
Probably in an antique store somewhere for 50
Probably.
cents. So the FBI tracked phone calls that the Brileys had made and received from an uncle in Philadelphia. They interviewed him, but he wasn't cooperative, so they set up a wiretap on his phone. Then they then they received a lead about an auto repair shop and garage, so they set up surveillance and saw the Briley brothers grilling chicken. Just grilling some chicken up. So they surrounded the building, and a group of armed FBI agents captured the Briley brothers. They didn't resist, and Linwood said, "Well, we had a good time for 19 days." And they were taken back to Mecklenburg and placed in lockdown. On October 12th, 1984, Linwood Briley was executed at 30 years old. James Briley married a woman named Evangeline Grant Redding on March 28th, 1985, in a prison ceremony. His father was in attendance, and Evangeline believed James to be innocent. James Briley was executed on April 18th, 1985, at 28 years old. His last words were that he didn't commit any murders or robberies. The day he was executed, inmates tried to injure guards with homemade knives to delay the process. One inmate and 9 guards were injured that day. And at some point, Linwood had one son, and James had 3 daughters that survived him. As far as we can tell, Anthony Briley and Duncan Meekins remain in prison today and have had multiple parole petitions denied. So that is the murder of Orlean Christian, John Gallagher, Blanche Page, Charles Garner, Harvey Wilkerson, Judy Barton, Harvey Jr., and the alleged murders of Michael McDuffie, Edric Alvin Clark, Mary Gowan, Christopher Phillips, Mary Wilfung, and the attempted murders of William and Virginia Butcher.
Like, what a story.
Yeah, right? That is so much.
Yeah. Which, when I first started doing the research for this episode, I had to text Courtney and be like, we haven't done this one right because a lot of things like the home invasions, like, were very
Mm-hmm.
similar to the South Side Strangler, which when I looked it up again was in the 80s. So that was like a decade later. So I feel like we probably came across this in our research for that episode because I'm sure they were like
Mm-hmm.
comparing the situations about like, oh no, it's like happening again.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of like eerie similarities to that one. So I had to like double check that we didn't already cover this one. But just so brutal. I mean, obviously, like all murders are brutal and horrific, but just so sporadic. Like there was no like certain gender, race, no certain part
Mm-hmm.
of town that they targeted. Like nothing. It was like all over the place. I mean, you had like a 75-year-old blind woman, an 8-month pregnant woman, a 5-year-old child, like just,
Yeah.
ugh,
Just horrific.
yeah.
And just like sad to like terrorize and then escape from prison. Like, it's just crazy.
And I couldn't find, from what I could find, that was still the largest death row inmate escape from prison. There might be another one since then, but I couldn't find
I
any others.
feel, and again, I might be talking out my ass. I feel like now, like death row inmates aren't allowed to just like hang out in a common room. Like
Like with each other. Yeah.
I feel like they're in like their own cells and like
Hmm.
22 hours of the day are like by themselves confined, like not
Yeah.
as free as they obviously were at this point. So
Yeah.
I could see that still being the biggest one and maybe that also like leading that change of like, you know what, when you're on death row, you're not having we're not having a death row common room.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And I mean, maybe those rules were in place then, but then the guards were just like, what the fuck ever. And since we
yeah,
know they
true.
were doing wild shit anyway, so
To be so scared of like the Briley brothers that you're like,
yeah.
okay, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah. And also, like, I feel like they were just executed so quickly. Like, I know it's
Yeah.
typical for like that time, but obviously now, I mean, we just talked earlier about a man who was sentenced to death. And if it actually goes through, it'll be 20, 30 years from now. And this was
Yeah.
like a few years later. Like, they were 28 and 30 years old, like when they were actually executed. It's just, you forget how much that's changed like in the last few
Hmm.
decades here.
Yeah. Also, a little spoiler for our next case is
Hmm.
also one where I was like, that happened quick.
Yeah.
And it's a few decades later. So I was
Yeah.
like kind of
Interesting.
surprised. I was like, huh, they got on that one quick.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just try to leave you with something a little happier at the end here.
Mhm.
Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So I'm gonna do a double perk of the week because I
Oh,
can.
love it.
Because I can. My first being that this past weekend I went to Wing Fest here in
Mm,
Knoxville.
fun.
Um, so fun, always a good time. I love wings. I don't know how else to say it. We ended up eating so many wings. Like we looked at ourselves afterwards and we're like, that was a lot of tickets that we went through because it's like one ticket per wing, basically.
Hmm.
Um, but so good. It's always good to try just like different wings and like so many places like bring like different kinds of stuff. Like one of our favorites was a like blueberry bourbon barbecue wing.
Oh,
It was
nice.
delicious. There was another place that had it was like a sriracha chili crisp wing and it had like little ramen pieces on it. Like everyone,
Mm,
all four of us loved it. It was so good.
yeah.
One of my favorites was a mango habanero.
Hmm.
So good. But it's just a fun time. That's always my dad's like birthday present. Now,
Hmm.
I started that last year and kind of continuing it because we just have a good time and we both love wings.
Yeah, sounds perfect.
So that's my first part of perk of the week. And my second part is that my couch was delivered today and it's solved all the issues in my life.
I'm so happy to hear that.
I'm just I've been like having an empty living room is like so
Hmm.
depressing
Yeah.
because it's like I don't know. Like, if I want to go read and I don't want to go downstairs, like I have to go to my bed. I don't want to go to my
Yeah.
bed. I want to go to my living room. So, we got that
It's also
delivered
hard to like
today.
feel settled in like the house until you
Yeah, it's
have
like
like those things. Yeah.
empty. It's just so empty where you're just like, it feels like it's feeling like we're not here
Hmm.
yet. Like we're still in transition. But I was very worried that the couch would be too big because we did
Hmm.
some painter's tape to begin with to measure it out to see if it would fit. And I was really scared that it was going to be like too tight or make the room feel small, but I think it ended up being the perfect size. I love
Hmm.
it. I think it's so pretty. The cats love it. They're immediately like on it, loving it. Amazing. But
Perfect.
it's just so nice to have a couch. And now it
Yeah.
feels more like a home versus just like I'm living in this house. So,
Yeah. It's not like a random Airbnb that doesn't have a couch
yeah.
and you have to go to some
Yeah.
other random furniture. It's like you have that homey feel now.
Yeah, and I bought these pillows at Target for $5, and one's a ghost and one's a pumpkin, and I'm
Love
obsessed.
it.
And now I can put them on my couch. And that's all I've been waiting for.
It's definitely that time of year. Super exciting. Also, gotta
Hmm.
say, because we talked about this a few months ago when I got my couch and I had my whole throw pillow conversation.
Hmm.
I have to say, at almost 8 months pregnant, I've changed my mind. I'm about the throw pillows. Give me all the throw pillows. I want 15 throw pillows on my couch.
I love
I
a
made
throw
a 360
pillow.
here, 180, which is
Yes.
360
360.
is how I
I
rotate
circled
myself
back
in all my
around.
pillows.
I circled fully back around to I still hate throw pillows. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Yeah,
I need
I
to throw
need
a pillow
to.
under every joint that exists on my
Yeah.
body.
I need to go buy some throw pillows because we could have bought throw pillows with this couch, but the options they had with it, I didn't like them.
Yeah.
I didn't go with the vibe.
Yeah.
The couch to me almost looks like vintagey. It's
Hmm.
new, but it kind of looks vintage, and then the pillows looked a little too modern, and so I felt like it
Yeah.
was
Just didn't go together.
conflicting. So I have to buy some throw pillows now. But oh well, I'll get to that at some point.
Yeah, that's next on the
I
list,
have
but
how long's my mortgage? 30 years to fill this house, so
plenty of time to figure out the throw pillow
yeah.
situation.
But that is my perk of the week, my double perk of the week. Jacqueline, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is that I finally got to live out a 20-year-old dream of seeing Simple Plan and Avril Lavigne in concert, and it was spectacular. It was everything my teenage heart could have hoped for.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
we
you didn't
went
go into
to,
labor.
and I did not go into labor, so that was good.
Hmm.
That would have not been a good time.
Yeah, that would have been like
Yeah.
crushing on that teenage dream.
Yeah. Courtney and Tiffany were having some hesitancies about going to this concert at this stage. And I was like, no, it's gonna be fine. I was like, but what if she's born in an Avril Lavigne concert? I mean, that sounds, but thankfully that did not happen. We did have a lightning delay, and had to miss the first opening act, which I'd never even heard of, so I didn't really care, but I know Tiffany knew them, and they literally were like, doors are closed, no one can get in. And then like an hour and a half later, they were like, okay, we're opening the doors, and then they immediately went on. Like people weren't even in the venue yet.
Wow.
Like
So they're like, we got a time schedule. We got to keep to it.
yeah, because it was like, okay, either you go on now or not at all, probably. So
Hmm.
that's, but
Was
we got
it
there.
at like the outdoor amphitheater in
Hmm.
Charlotte?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and we had like covered seats, which was nice because it did rain for a good portion of it. But
Hmm.
we were worried about because it was supposed to be scattered thunderstorms all night. So I was like fully thinking it was going to cancel like completely.
Yeah.
Like we got ready and we're like sitting in the bed because we were about to leave. And then they sent like the first update. And then we're like, okay, well, we're only 8 minutes away. Let's just like sit here. And I'm like, my God, what if we drove 4 hours and got a hotel for this concert to be canceled?
He's
Um,
sitting here in my fishnet tights and my tie.
exactly. Exactly.
How many other people at the concert were in a tie? Were you the only one?
Oh no, no.
Okay. A
There were
lot.
tons of fishnets and then not as many ties as fishnets, but there were a good number of ties.
Okay.
They actually pulled up two girls on stage who were like dressed like Avril with like the short skirt and the tie, and they
Hmm.
got like signed skateboards and everything. Like that was pretty cool. Um, Also speaking of my fishnet tights that that Tiffany had to put on and get up to my knees or get up to like my thighs, and then I just had to do like a bunch of like wide-legged squats to like tear the waist seams so that I could get them up all the way.
Yeah.
So it was quite the ordeal to get dressed. So all of that, and then they're like, nobody can come in. And I was like, this isn't
Nobody can come
happening.
in.
So thankfully it uh went according to I guess the backup plan. We like got into the venue when Simple Plan went on. So we didn't see the first song, but we heard it. And then we were in our
Yeah.
seats during the second song. So I was like, okay, this could have been worse. It's great.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it was a great time. It was a wonderful concert. Just everything I ever dreamed it would be. So
Hmm.
that was my perk of the week.
Nice. If you want to tell us about your perk of the week, about your thoughts on this case, about your teenage dreams that came to fruition, about your wing fest, about your couch, anything like that, all of our details are in the show notes and you can find them there or our most important platform, patreon.com/caffeinated crimes. There we have ad-free episodes. If there's a two-parter, you get both parts same day. We have a bonus every month, Discord access, just a lot of fun perks over there. And we just like having that platform to interact with everyone a little bit closer. Um, yeah, patreon.com/caffeinated crimes.
And as always, if you can leave us any reviews anywhere that you can, Apple Podcast is great. That helps us get noticed a little bit more. 5 stars is best, and a little comment about what you like about us. And you can also somehow rate us on Spotify and give us a thumbs up on YouTube. And anywhere that you listen to us, if there's somewhere to be like, I love these people, do
Hmm.
that thing. That would be great. We would appreciate that.
Yeah, but in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.